folks, we're back, and I have made some changes on the Asteroids game, and I want to show you what I did and keep working on it. The idea is I wanted to bring in the enemy ship. Let me show you what I have so far. So take a look at my screen. Here we go. What you'll notice is you got your standard Asteroids game. Hopefully I won't die too soon. At a certain point, there's the ship. You notice that? UFO comes on the screen, moves around in random locations, shoots me with a bullet. Oh, man. So let's take a look and see what we did. Number one, the UFO. I want to talk about the UFO, and then we'll talk about the bullet and all of the algorithms that go with it. Now, this was a really complex thing. This took me a good, I'd say almost an hour to kind of walk through this. I was trying to videotape it, record me doing it, and I just found that there was just a lot more to it than I thought. So let's just talk about what I did. First of all, the costume is just a clip art of a UFO. I just dug around till I could find one that was open source and public domain, so I wouldn't have to give credit or anything. And you can just Google stuff like that. Just Google UFO clip art, and I'm sure you'll be able to find something that will be shown as public domain. Um, that would be another tutorial. For time's sake, I don't want to do it. The first thing I want to just show you is a couple things here is for the UFO, when the green flag is clicked, we're going to hide it. It's always a good idea at the beginning of any game to hide anything that shouldn't be showing. And we're going to have this variable that we created here. We got a lot of variables in here. And we create this variable. It's called isActive. This variable is only a variable of, oops, sorry, I did not mean to do that. It's only a variable for this UFO sprite. And it's either active or it's not. And we're using what's called a Boolean value, but we're using sort of what a lot of computer programs do for Boolean, where 0 is false and 1 is true. So we're just saying it's not active. Now I could create a string and call it false. As far as variables go, I don't know if there's a standard Boolean that's true or false. It always depends on the programming language. In our case, 0 and 1 will do. Just note the 0 means it is not active. It's hidden, so you could probably guess. Okay, so at some point the game starts. So when the game starts, we're going to hide it just in case for some reason it was showing. So it's kind of like a fail-safe thing. Probably don't have to do that. We're going to do a thing called a timer. Now the timer is when we reset the timer, and this is just part of sensing, it's just built right in. It wasn't a variable we created or anything. We just dragged it out. Reset the timer means it starts a timer at 0 seconds and begins counting up. Okay, so let's just move over here so you can kind of see what's going on here. And let's just go ahead and zoom in just a little bit more, not too much. There we go. So hopefully the color coding and seeing my other tutorials, you figured out where all this stuff is. Just as a reminder, look at the color that, the wait until is a good one that it's like a count up as soon as the timer reaches a certain value. And we're going to say wait until the timer is greater than a random number between 3 and 6. And so it gives us about a 3-second. And at that point, it's going to broadcast start UFO. Now, there is this list that called a UFO NX, and I want to go over this a little bit later. It's called a list. But just for now, let's just wait. We're going to go to the broadcast start UFO because that's what's going to happen. And so, of course, this is going to be the UFO movement. So when we broadcast start UFO, we're going to reset the timer. That sets it back to 0. And then we're going to go to a random position we're going to show. Then we're going to set isActive to 1, which means it is now active. And then we're going to just randomly pick a number between 2 to 4 different positions, and we're going to glide for 3 seconds to wherever that random position happens to be. Okay, so we're going to do this possibly 2 times. We might do it 4 times. It could be 3 times. We want to just keep it a little bit random. And it's just going to move to a random location on the screen. Okay. And then, and this is where we're going to start talking about these items. And we'll talk about it. Okay, so let's do this. Let's talk about this end UFO. what we want to do, let me just explain the algorithm and then I'll explain how we get these items, length of, etc. So we're going to glide to an X and a Y position, but we want it to be random. And basically what this is going to do here is it's going to move off of the screen. So we want it to go off of the screen. Now, if we always set it to go one place off of the screen, it would be really kind of, I don't know, I think it's kind of boring if you're always doing the same thing every time. So I love to throw in random whenever possible. So the idea of moving randomly off the screen, anywhere off the screen, but it could be in any one of these sort of corners or regions. So what we did is I decided let's pick a random pick a random X and Y position, but I want them to be preset. I want them to be possible numbers. So what I did here is we created this thing called a list. Now it's under variables, so I'm going to click variables here and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and we have this thing called make a list. So we wanted to have a list of end X positions and end Y positions. So if we set a list of end X positions, where could we go that would take us off of the screen to the left or the right? Well, we already know that I believe the width and the height is like negative 240 or positive 240. But I wanted to give it a number kind of way off of the screen so it would just go all the way off no matter what. And so what we decided to do is let's just add some items. So the end X is going to have one of two different values. Now let's just go ahead and show you the end X so you can see. So the UFO end X has a negative 500 and a 500. Now, why we deleted all of them and then added them, I'm not entirely sure. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to clean this up because I'm pretty sure this could happen right here. So we're just going to add these two to this. We're not going to delete anything and see if this still works. Move them off because I don't think that is necessary. Let's just go ahead and clean up blocks so we see this. So when we start the green flag, we're going to go ahead and add those, and let's just click here. And so I think we can move those. Yeah, we can. So we're just going to hit start. Okay, that's probably why I deleted them all. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Delete all of. So I guess we needed that after all. Delete all of UFO end X, we add 2, and then we're going to delete all of UFO end Y, and we'll clean up our blocks. And then we'll run it again, and we run it. No matter how many times we run it, it's always going to be those values, those preset values. Okay, so what are we doing with those numbers? You see where there's the ship, it's moving around, and all of a sudden it just speeds up and goes off the screen. Okay, so that's exactly what is happening. It's picking a random position on the screen, and there's our UFO again. And it looked like it was heading to that same direction this time. Let's run it again, and then we'll see if we can see it do the same thing. Okay, now I'm just getting hit by asteroids, which is no fun at all. So let me just stop this for a second. We go to the asteroids, and let's just set the big asteroids to 1. And it's going to be a lot less likely that I'll get hit. In fact, let's go full screen here. There's my UFO. It's moving around, and it's going to go off the screen at some point. And there it is. It's going off of the screen. Oh, it just kept hitting me. Let's run it again. This time I'll move out of the way of the bullet. Oh, too far. And you see where it went off of the screen into a different location? Oops, I hit an asteroid. But do you notice it went off to the far upper left? It went off to the right one time. And so I think that's a pretty good way of doing it. So the thing is it could be negative 500, which would be off to the left, and it could be positive 400, which would be down below, or positive 400, which could be up high, negative down low. So it could be one of these two corners, upper left, upper right, or it could be the right hand. It's going to head towards one of these corners. but because it's starting at different locations, it's seemingly like going on a different path, which is one of the reasons why I had it way off of the screen. So depending on where it is, it might look like it's going in a different direction. Now we can improve this later on, but I just wanted you to see what's going on. So that's what those X and Y positions are about. So let's go back and let's hide those variables again. Oh, because I have to be on the UFO. So we go to the UFO and let's just take those off. We don't need to see those anymore. We know that that's what they're going to do. And that's what this is about. And we delete them first so that we don't have leftover. We don't keep adding to it because we don't need to keep adding more of these numbers. All right, so enough about that. Let's keep going. Let's talk about the movement. So I already mentioned we're just gliding to random positions. And then it's going to take us 4 seconds to move off the screen. And then we're going to set is active to false again, 0. And then we're going to wait until the timer picks a random number. And here we did between 1 and 2. So of course we're going to want to change that number and broadcast it again. So probably the better bet would be to do a higher number. So like let's even do somewhere between 10 and 20. Actually, before we do that, let's keep these numbers pretty low. I'll do between 5 and 7. So that what this does then is once it goes off the screen, we set the active to 0, and then we wait until the timer counts up and is actually the reset of the timer. I think we need to duplicate that. Yeah, actually, we don't need to duplicate it. I just need to take that reset timer and set it here. This is when we want to reset it. And that should work a little bit better. So I hope you understand why we're doing that. Okay, before I talk any more about that, let's go over the phrase that pays. It's a thing I do for my students that watch the video, and I also want to hit some core concepts we did. One of the things we've already talked about right now is the timer. So the timer counts up in seconds, and it's a bad idea to use current seconds because it's seconds on the computer clock. The timer is what you really want. And whenever you reset it, it starts at 0, moves up. So that was a really important one. The other thing that we're currently working on is this thing called random choice, where we're trying to choose from a set of numbers. So if you want to choose from a set of numbers, what you do is you need to make a list of the numbers. So the example of, here, I'll go ahead and hide that one. So the example of the list of the numbers is we made a list. We had 2 different lists, UFO and X, UFO and Y. And then what we want to do is we want to pick item of random 1 to length of the list. What does that mean? Okay, so when we glide to one of our different locations, we're going to pick a random number 1, 2, length of UFO and X. So I'm going to bring that back up again, make this a little bit bigger. If you look here, notice how we added 2 items to our UFO and X. The first one has a number of 1, and the second one has a number of 2. Those are considered indexing. Most computer programs actually begin counting at 0, not 1. This is just something that Scratch does to just try to simplify things for younger learners. But normally, when you're dealing with a list of items, 0 would be the first one, 2 would be the second one. But we have 2 items, so the length of it is set to 2. So the length equals 2. So when we say pick a random and we say 1 to length of UFO and X, we're picking either 1 or 2. So we're picking a random number inclusive between 1 and the length of it, which is 2. Which means if it picks 1 randomly, that the X is going to be negative 500. If it ends up picking a 2, the X will be a 500. So that's what that pick random 1 to length of. And so that is something that's not necessarily going to be clear. So it's definitely something worth focusing on. Okay, and so let me just pull this all the way out. So let's just talk real briefly. So if we just did this here, we would be saying just glide 4 seconds to negative 500 of x and a y of negative 500. But rather, we want to pick one of those two random values. So if we pick item 1, for example, of UFO index, it means we're always going to pick that first item. If instead of 1 of UFO X, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do it that way. What happened there? Glide, oh, okay. Sorry, if we were to do item 1 of UFO index, then it would be negative 500. But instead, we're going to pick a random number. And so to pick a random number, I'm going to just pick right here between one number and another number. So that first number would be 1, and then the second number would be the length of that value. So between 1 and the length of UFO index. And then, oh, sorry, I forgot to do that. Item 1, that's what I did wrong. Item 1, and instead of 1, we're going to pick a random number between 1 and the length of it, and then we drop that in there. Sorry, that was so confusing. So one more time, instead of negative 500, we're going to pick an item, in this case 1 of UFO NY, but instead let's pick a random number between that 1 and the length of UFO NY. We just drop it right in there. And then that is how we are randomly selecting one of those items from that list that you see here and the other one that you saw earlier. Sorry, that was probably confusing. Okay, so then we broadcast start UFO, and then we just do that over and over and over again. So what we're doing here is it's UFO movement. Basically, appear in a random location, move around a few times, and then go off the screen, and then reset your timer to do it all over again. Notice the last thing you do on when I receive start UFO is to broadcast start UFO, right? But the thing that makes it a random amount of time is that wait until. So after we set the is active to 0, we reset the timer, we wait until timer is greater than 50, then we broadcast start UFO. Hopefully that makes a lot more sense now. Okay. So you now might be wondering about shooting. So we have this when I receive start UFO. So this is the exact same thing here, but we're just separating out the movement from shooting. So we're going to repeat. We're going to do this thing until is active is equal to 0. So we're going to keep shooting until the is active is set to 0. Now I realized the last thing I want to do, I don't want to shoot if I'm off the screen. So I'm going to do a quick little change around here. I'm going to set is active to 0 before I glide off the screen. So this makes sure that we can't shoot while we're heading off of the screen. Let's go ahead and clear that up as well. Okay, so let's look at that and just remember, after we've gone multiple locations and we're ready to move off the screen, we set our active to 0, which means we'll stop shooting. And so what we do is we keep repeating until active is equal to 0. So that means we repeat this thing, and as soon as is active is set off, we're gonna, this will repeat this stuff until we're no longer active, and then we're done repeating it. So what are we doing? We're gonna shoot every 2 seconds. We'll create a clone of the UFO bullet, and then we're going to set the UFO X. Now here is the thing we want to do. So we want that UFO bullet to spawn at the same location as the spaceship. So what we do is we have to have a variable called UFO X and a variable called UFO Y. Now the key here is that variable needs to be available for all items. Actually, yes, right. Because we need the bullet to be able to find where is the UFO X, where is the UFO Y. So we did this very similar to when the asteroids would spawn. We did the exact same thing. Okay, so let's talk about the bullet now. Okay, so we create a clone of the bullet, and we then mark where the UFO's X and Y positions are. So let's go to the bullet now. Now in the bullet, what I did for a costume, I just basically drew a sphere, and I filled it using, how did I fill it? Come to think of it, I used the paint bucket. That's what I did. And on the fill, I created a gradient that I would go different spots. So it's a light color radiating outwards to a dark color, and you can sort of move this around anywhere you want. Usually off center is kind of the way it's kind of cool to do. So that gives it that sort of sphere look. Okay, so that's what I did for the costume. When the green flag is clicked, we basically hide the bullet. We don't want to see it. When we start as a clone, we're going to show the bullet, and we're going to go to the X and Y position, and we're going to point towards the ship, and forever we're going to move 7 steps. That is the speed of the bullet. And so forever we move 7 steps, and we keep checking to see, are we touching the edge or not, which is part of sensing. It's all built in. You just go to sensing, you'll see the touching. And then from touching, you just click here, and you're going to see all the different ones here. Edge is what we used. If we're touching the edge, we want to hide, and we can no longer do any damage. Okay, we're going to go ahead and clean up our blocks, and let's talk a little bit more about our bullet. What else is our bullet going to do? I almost forgot. My next phrase that pays, number 3, is the edge algorithm, which is what we did there. We're forever moving. If we're touching the edge, we hide. It's that simple, but let's go ahead and put it in there. Algorithm for an item disappearing when it reaches the edge is if touching edge, hide. This should go inside of a forever loop and be moving. If it's not moving, it makes no sense at all. So that's the edge algorithm. Okay, so now we talked about what other things should the bullet be doing. I'm going to add a comment here, and this is just bullet movement. One of the cool things, if the bullet starts heading for the ship, if the ship moves out of its position, the bullet's still going to keep going in that direction. So just put move towards ship, disappear if it hits the edge. Okay, a bit of a collision detection, but it's more bullet movement than anything else. Okay, so that's bullet movement. Now we're going to do collision detection. So I'm going to add a comment. This is long. Edge detection. Hide if, oops, not hid. Hide if we hit a ... ship, big, middle, or small asteroid. Okay, that's as simple as it is. Okay, now we put a little bit of a wait, a 0.1 second wait. And the reason why we put that 1 second wait is if we don't wait for just a millisecond, then sometimes we can't have other things happen, like a ship getting hit by the bullet and getting destroyed, or an asteroid breaking up into smaller pieces. So that's kind of what the bullet's going to do. If the bullet touches a ship, if the bullet touches a big asteroid, a medium asteroid, a small asteroid, any of those, then it will wait for basically 1/10 of a second and then hide. So I'll add that little part of the algorithm right there. This, by the way, is edge detection. Put a 0.1 second wait time for the game to process hits. And that's for the other objects. There we go. The phrase that pays number 4 is in collision detection. Always add a very short wait time before hiding an object. This allows for the game engine to process any additional hits. If we don't add that in there, then things won't necessarily disappear. So a little bit of wait time is all we need. And that's just because it's processing a lot of things. It's doing it over the internet. And so there's just a lot of things we have to take into consideration. Just a little bit of wait time, doesn't need much, but that's will be helpful. All right, let's go back to the game. So that's the bullet. So once we have that working, the bullet disappears. We just have to deal with all the things a bullet can hit. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to the top object. The bullet can hit the ship. Yeah, we don't want it to hit the ship. So now what we do is we look for the collision detection. Let's do a little cleanup blocks. Looking for collision detection. There it is. Okay, in our collision detection, we already had the if we're touching the asteroid, or we're touching a medium, or we're touching a small asteroid, or we're touching, and this is what we added. We added an or, we added the touching UFO bullet. You're just going to do that for all the other ships. Let's look at the asteroid. And we're going to look at collisions on the asteroid as well. And you know how we'll know it's the collision? We're looking for one of these big if checks. If it's touching the ship, or it's touching the bullet, or it's touching the UFO bullet. The UFO bullet should be able to also hit the big asteroid. We'll do the same for the medium, so you don't want to miss it on there. There it is, UFO bullet. You can see it right there. Just move it there, just a little bit to the side, see? And then we also have it for the small asteroid. Same thing, add it to the end there. And the bullet's never going to hit the UFO because it's the UFO that's doing the shooting, and a bullet won't hit another bullet. That's just not necessary. We could have a bullet do it too, and that would be something you could use to add and improve. Okay, I think we're at the part now where I just want to recap what we've done so you can, in case you missed something, I just want to make sure I cover all the things that we did or that I did that was different. Honestly, the only thing you've got to think about is that your UFO bullet are the main ones that you're going to add. And if you haven't done anything with a UFO or a UFO bullet yet, this will be easy because you just have to see what we have. So a couple just things, I'm not going to go over all this, but you can sort of see, you can pause the video and check out each of these pieces, look at the color, figure out how we're doing it. I think the big thing that we did that's new is that idea of a list variable, and that you want to make sure you delete everything at the very beginning, delete everything that was in it, and then you add the things that you want. Now, this idea of a list can be really powerful. There's a lot you can do with that. Hopefully you can already begin to think of ideas of how you could take advantage of it. If not, come back to this later as you develop more games. You may find that that's a really handy thing to have available. Anyway, so we have the when I receive start. You've got all those. The only thing else I should mention is variables. We added the is active variable, and that's either a 0 or 1. And then we added, and by the way, this one is active is just for the UFO sprite. And then we also have the UFO X, UFO Y. Those are for all sprites, so that anything you can send that information and they can read that information. We have a when I receive start UFO that we broadcast ourselves after the timer goes off. And so this is the first one here is all about the UFO movement. And so you see all this here. The one that you can't quite see all in one screen is this glide, and we're just picking one of the random locations. And you see there's one where it's an item, and inside is a pick random 1, 2, whatever. And then inside of the 1, 2, we have the length of UFO. UFO X, and then the other is of UFO X. So it's a little bit complex, and we do the same thing for the Y. The only difference it's length of UFO Y and length of UFO Y. So you just got to make sure you get those in there. This is likely a place where you may have some trouble, so I definitely recommend you pause to make sure you have that looking just right. Okay. And then the rest here you can see, and then we're going to go ahead and scroll down so you can also see the when I receive start UFO, and this all has to do with the shooting. Okay, so that is what we put under the ship. The bullet is a little bit shorter. We have a when the green flag is clicked, we just hide it. When we start as a clone, we've got this where we are pointing into a direction and moving that way until we hit the edge. And then we added some collision detection in here. And so the bullet, the UFO bullet, it's going to disappear if it hits the ship, asteroid, medium asteroid, or the small asteroid, any of those items, and then we wait here. Honestly, I suppose we could have also dropped this into here, or we could even move this into here and make it even shorter. So we could actually reduce this a little bit. Anyway, so that's the main thing there. And then the only other thing is all the other items that can be hit by the bullet, we just add to our collision detection. So in the ship, and in where right there, in the asteroid, in the medium asteroid, there it is. We got in the medium asteroid, we added it over here. Let's clean up our blocks. And so there it is. There's that touching UFO bullet. Do the same thing for the small asteroid. And once we get all of that, you're good to go. And so that's it. So this is by no means this is a complete game. I mean, it is. Obviously, it's got AI, it's got movement, it's got shooting, it's got scoring, it's got a game over status. It's got all the elements of a game, but I feel like this is just a starting point. I feel like this is sort of my first release of the game. A good thing you could do once you have a game like this is get people to play it, watch how they play it, think of, and just listen to them. Is it too hard? Is it too easy? Does it get impossibly hard, or does it just get easy and just stop being interesting? Think of ways that you can enhance it. I'm pretty sure you have all the skills that you could figure things out. And one good thing you can do is just experiment with stuff. It's also a good idea to have extra when I start as a clones so that you can experiment with other things. And then if it works, great. If it doesn't, you can just toss it or you can just rearrange it. So have fun with coding. I hope you enjoyed this. I think I'm done on my series. I might add some other things later on. But I wouldn't wait for it. So just go out there and code and have some fun. Thank you so much for watching.